I stepped out of the cab, barely awake from a red-eye flight, and dragging my suitcase up the gravel path when I noticed something that didn't make sense. Three strangers sipping lemonade on my front porch like it was Sunday brunch at their own place. One guy actually smiled at me and said the muffins were delicious. For a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming or hallucinating from the jet lag. But then I saw her Karen from the HOA, standing in my living room in heels and a fake realtor badge, pointing around like she owned the place, saying, "This charming 3-bedroom won't last long." And I just froze, because the truth slammed into me like a freight train. This woman was hosting an open house. For my house that I legally owned, paid for in full, never listed, never rented, never gave permission for anything. And just to put the cherry on top, she'd changed the locks while I was gone. 2 weeks earlier, I'd flown out to Denver for a software rollout project. Nothing unusual. I do contract engineering work, and these trips are part of the deal. I left my house secured with my smart system, a do not disturb sign in the mailbox, and Paul, my neighbor, keeping an eye out. Everything was normal, so I thought. What I didn't know was that Karen had been eyeing my home like a hawk the moment I pulled out of the driveway. Now, Karen, she's the kind of HOA president that makes people consider selling their house just to get away. She once fined a woman $50 for having wind chimes she called too whimsical. She measures lawn height with a ruler, runs HOA meetings like she's a 5-star general, but somehow has no actual military background. Just a god complex and a clipboard. I'd mostly stayed off her radar until this moment. But apparently, leaving your house unattended is all the invitation she needs. As I walked up, one of the open house guests looked me over and asked if I was the handyman. I could feel a blood vessel pop behind my eye. I walked past him, stepped through the front door, and there she was, laughing, sipping sparkling water like she was in a reality show. She looked at me, went pale for a second, then put on that smug smile I've seen too many times. "Oh, this area's off limits to staff," she said, like I was interrupting her big day. I stared her down and said, "I own this house." And without missing a beat, she said, "Not anymore." According to her, the HOA had foreclosed on the house for non-payment of dues and was now facilitating the sale. Problem was, I'd paid my dues back in January, on time, and had the receipt. I demanded to see the foreclosure documents. She handed me a laminated sheet that looked like it had been slapped together on Microsoft Word. The fonts didn't even match. Worse yet, the smart lock on my front door no longer recognized my access. I tried to enter and was physically blocked by 2 men in matching polos labeled HOA Enforcement Unit, written in black marker, no less. I called the police. When they showed up, I laid out the facts: legal owner, locked out of my own house by a fake realtor with a god complex. Karen, in her Karen way, handed over a bundle of forged documents and claimed I had abandoned the home. The officers looked skeptical, but without proof in hand, there wasn't much they could do. One pulled me aside and said, "You need to get your ownership records, like, now." So I did. I drove straight to the county recorder's office, pulled my deed, my tax records, the title, insurance, all airtight. But that wasn't enough. I called my lawyer, and we drafted a cease and desist letter that same night and emailed it to the entire HOA board. And here's where things started to get fun. You see, Karen had disabled the Cybel security cams, but I had backups motion-triggered, cloud-synced footage from inside the house and around the garage. I watched the video, jaw-dropping, as I saw her pry open my garage window with a crowbar, climb in, and start walking around like she was on HGTV. She came back 3 times over that week, and even installed a keypad of her own over mine. She staged the house, took photos, and uploaded a listing to a sketchy real estate site that looked one step above a Craigslist ad. She even had brochures with my name crossed out and hers printed over in Comic Sans. You can't make this up. Paul, my neighbor, came over when he saw the cop car. I filled him in, and he told me that Karen had been walking around the property, talking to neighbors like the place was going up for sale, asking if they knew any interested buyers. She even bragged at the last HOA meeting about expanding her influence. By the time the open house ended, she strutted out wearing oversized sunglasses and told me, "You'll want to remove your things by Sunday. The new owner's bringing a truck." That was the moment I snapped. The next day, some guy named Brock, big guy, mirrored sunglasses, snakeskin boots, pulled up in a truck with a trailer. Claimed he'd bought the place from the HOA, had papers, said Karen sold it to him for 15 grand cash. I looked at the documents, same fake law firm, same bogus signature. I told him he'd been scammed. He puffed up, said he'd call the sheriff. I told him to go right ahead. Meanwhile, Paul started recording everything. I called the same local reporter who had covered a zoning fight last year. Told her she might want to bring a camera. By the time the sheriff arrived, so did the press. Karen came flying down the street in a golf cart, holding a folder like it was a royal decree. Claimed the HOA had voted to seize the house, and that I had been warned. I handed the sheriff my proof. Karen handed him her glitter-glued folder. He barely glanced at hers before turning to me and asking if I'd be willing to file an official report. I said yes. Brock realized then he'd been conned, and it got even messier when a second man, Marcus, arrived, also claiming he'd bought the house from Karen for due la $25K. Same documents. Same fake firm. Now the sheriff called in backup. Fraud, forgery, impersonation. Karen was detained on the spot. The HOA board immediately held an emergency vote to suspend her. That night, I was finally allowed back into my home. I walked through the door like I was stepping into a crime scene. The wine bottles were empty, my bookshelf rearranged, and a sticky note on the fridge read, "Hope you don't mind the staging K." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The FBI got involved within a week. Turns out Karen had tried similar schemes in 2 other neighborhoods, using her HOA status to fake authority. She was charged with multiple felonies, including wire fraud, criminal trespassing, and impersonation. During her trial, I testified, along with Brock, Marcus, Paul, and even an elderly couple who said Karen once tried to get them to sign their property over during a health scare. The judge didn't hold back. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison with no chance of parole for 4. The HOA disbanded shortly after. We replaced it with a volunteer neighborhood watch group. No dues, no drama, just people looking out for each other. And Karen? Last I heard, she was appealing her sentence from a county jail library, blaming deep state interference and claiming she was trying to help the community all along. But my house, it's mine again, fully, freely, and legally. And the sign I hung above the porch says everything you need to know. Private residence. Not for sale. Especially not by Karen. If you've ever had a nightmare HOA experience, or if someone's ever tried to take something that's yours through sheer audacity, drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Let's make sure these power-hungry scammers get exposed, one fake foreclosure at a time.